What is up, guys, and welcome back to OWL by the Numbers, your one-stop spot for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 28, we'll be taking a look at the wild week that was the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in Fantasy Overwatch League. We'll have a little bit of trash talk for a couple of people who could not make it out tonight. One is in Florida, and one I know is doing a lot of podcast prep for mash those buttons while Ja is away. But of course, there was a lot of stuff going on. We had our budget league, we had our listener league, we had our host league, all of that good stuff. But before we can jump into the agenda for tonight and introduce you to my co-host for tonight, let me just take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So as you can tell, it is just Editor and I. We have the HND crew in the house tonight. AKA, we have the better fantasy players in the house. As, we put up some pretty good weeks. But you know what? It was a pretty normal week outside of some of the lopsided scores, but if there was one thing that stayed true through and through, was the fact that we absolutely crushed Ramses a vast majority of the week.
It's Ramsey's pretty much sucked. He's like, we called him out for being a loser on Twitter, and he's like, I'm not a loser. I usually finish second or third. That's not winning. You still lost. You don't play the Super Bowl, lose, and call yourself the winner.
Right.
You're the loser. I lost this week in our listener league to Totem. I can admit that I lost. I'm not going to call myself a winner for taking second. But this fantasy week was... I don't even know how to describe it. Like, Thursday was, till 2 a.m., Map 5s. And then you had, like you pointed this out, you had the Charge New York Excelsior game, which was the biggest fantasy dud game of probably the stage so far.
And honestly, it's probably the worst fantasy outing we've had all season, at least in regard to the player scores, and that was on Sunday night.
Yeah, because usually, even in like 4-0s, someone scores points.
Yeah, now it's just like, we have a ton of players that didn't even reach 80.
Yeah, and I think that has something to do with, if it's a quick 4-0, May's not getting the kills and the damage done, neither is Reaper. Orissa's spraying some damage. Nobody's, like, pumping out anything. The only ones who probably could have done anything maybe would have been the healers. But, yeah, it was overall very ugly. Ugly Sunday. Really, all around, it was an ugly Sunday. We had the Fantasy Gods Philadelphia Fusion proved to us that while they still aren't that great of a team, man, can they pump out fantasy numbers.
Yeah, not only that, but we also had a Map 5 performance that we probably wouldn't have expected, like with Dallas Fuel when they went up against the LA Gladiators. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to what Shaz has been doing, but he's been putting in some serious work with 200-plus point performances. I'm really thinking a couple of players that hit 200-plus this week, because I know Shore4 was up there, as well as Void again, who has been a repeat offender for the 200-plus club.
Yeah, I want to say Boombox, too. I don't know that, again, we don't have the tallies for everyone in front of us, but I want to say Boombox was close to it, because he's been the top performing support player in the league, and Shaz is kind of up there with him, but Boombox, up until this week, I know was the number one. So I don't know what Boombox actually had. What did you look like you just looked it up?
Well, I did not actually write down Boombox, but the other 200-plus support performance that I saw this week was Twilight, who put up 200.82 on Sunday. And, outside of that, I'm trying to think who else was up there. I know Bedosian put up 212 on Thursday. Shu had a 220-plus game on Thursday. Boombox on Thursday did 236.18. And then you had like Raucous posting 205 on Sunday. So it's a pretty good week for the support line across the board. And I will admit, like, I was 100% wrong on being iffy on Hagopen. He put up some monster numbers this week. I think he averaged like 180. And his cost too was relatively low, so he did get a lot of value this past week. But let's talk about the leagues that you and I run week to week. So obviously every week we do our host league, and you know the most important thing to note is Ramsey's lost. You know, he finished in 4th.
Yeah, he came in dead last with 948 points. And he had Surefour and Void on his team.
Mm-hmm.
So he had 200-point winners. You won, though. You had 1,124. You had a very good week between Surefour. You went with the Gladiator trio.
I did.
Surefour, Void, and Shaz. And then you went, 2 sleepers, really, in Envy and Guido, who are starting and are low in cost, and then Architect paid out for you too. I kind of went the same route as you a little bit. I took second with 1,089 points, and I did Surefour Void, and I actually went Jonak. And the reason that's surprising is Jonak, all the New York Excelsior players have not been putting out any fantasy numbers.
Right.
So coming into this week, that was a huge, like, not a leap, but like, I was like, okay, I have a feeling Jonak's going to do something this week, and he did. He was 0.45 away from 200 points, so I couldn't complain. Then I had Guido as well, and then Choyobin and Corey, and both of them scored over 150 points, so I can't really complain there. Bob had an interesting lineup. He did well. It's just he had Zachary on there, Stratus, Santan, Arc. So he went Washington Justice heavy. Okay, then. And I will point out in Ramsey's defense, he came in last, but he started Unco this week.
Mm-hmm. That was
Unco
a
hurt
pick
a
that
lot
bit
of
us in the
people.
ass in a couple of leagues.
Yeah, Unco did not play at all. We don't know why. I think maybe he was sick. But he didn't play at all this week. Because they had 2 matches he didn't play. So we'll see. I don't know if you can trust picking Unco at this point. Because we just don't know. We could just see Harry Hook, because Harry Hook came in and wasn't horrible. So we'll see what's going on there. We know Jake was another one who kind of screwed over a lot of people, but that the whole outlaw DPS rotation is kind of, not touchable from a fantasy point of view at this point, in my mind, because you never know who's going to play. So yeah, it was a good one. And then we have this coming, our host league will be on Saturday this week. So should be a good one. I've actually already picked my team, but I'm not going to divulge it because Ramses will download it and
he'll just mirror it
and cheat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see the other leagues we do. I'll get our budget league out of the way. So every week's me and Totem are doing $80 or 80 points only that you can spend. You beat me this time. You actually beat me pretty well. We both got screwed over on the Mecco.
We
New York
had
Excelsior thing.
Like half of our starting roster was the same. And the funny thing is, like, every time we talk about the budget league, because usually, like, I said anywhere from like 3 to 5 lineups for pretty much every day. I think this week the only day I didn't do that was Saturday, just because I was too busy. But the budget league always finishes in the middle of the pack out of the 5, even though I'm not using the full point cap to its fullest, which I always think is pretty funny. But yeah, Mecco was one of those things. It's like New York, they've been really low this past week. Like, I know you played Jonak when they went to a 5th map. And really, I think that game, Jonak might have even, like, outpaced what he did in the past 2 or 3 games collectively, like, fantasy-wise. Because he was close to that 200. I know, for the most part, New York's just been putting up, like, 70 and 80-point totals, which has not been that good. But yeah, in regards to our lineups, I know we both started the same tank lineup of Meko and Hotba. And then we both started Guido on the support line.
Yeah, because, I mean, you really have to kind of cap yourself at, like, nothing more than 15 points. And hopefully something lower than that. So if I remember correctly what the points was, Hotba was 15, Guido was 15 or less. And, like, we kind of both had the same approach of we're going to try and spend cheaply on our supports and tanks, and then maybe get some decent damage dealers. Because, we took the same tank line. I took Raucous, and you took Neptuno, I believe it was.
I think you got it backwards.
You took Raucous, I took Neptuno. And Raucous scored over 200 points. So, that basically, that's what won you the map, is Raucous. Because our DPS lineups were not the same people, but the same points.
Yeah, it was really, really close.
Yeah, so I took Architect and AKM, and Architect had 186 points, and AKM had 89. Then who'd you grab?
I had Libero and Stitch for my DPS duo.
Yeah, which put up almost identical numbers. So, yeah, it really came down to Raucous and Neptuno, and you came out ahead this week. So, good on you.
Gotta even it up. So we'll see what happens with the tiebreaker. Because, I mean, really, this week is going to determine the stage.
Yes.
So, outside of that, I did set throughout the week 13 different lineups. So I kind of, wrote down all my totals, averaged it out. I did finish with back-to-back days posting 1,100-plus point lineups, which is pretty good, especially since Friday didn't have the marathon Map 5s of Thursday from what we saw. But man, I felt bad for people on Thursday when they post 1,050 and then they hardly even break the top 10, everyone was kind of in the same boat. No matter how many points you put up, you could never have that feeling of being comfortable with where you were at in the standings, because everyone was putting up 200 plus points. And I know there were I think there were 8 or 9 different people that day who had 200 plus, at least from the player perspective.
Yeah, on Thursday, I scored just shy of 1,100 points. And in the tourney Thursday or whatever, I didn't even crack the top 20. I had a great week, and I didn't even crack the top 20.
Feels bad, man.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I can't really argue going up against a team. The thing is, you just had to basically start anybody from the Charge or the Mayhem to win.
Mm-hmm.
If you had, looking at the Thursday, the top winner, he started Nero, BQB, Gargoyle, Hotba, Hagapen, and then Boombox. So, Charge, Mayhem, and Boombox was the highest scoring team. So, and in my competitive 1v1, I went up against a guy who took second.
Oof.
Yeah,
I lost. He started the same lineup, didn't he?
No. D-Hulky got Nero, BQB, Hotba, Michelle, Shu, and Twilight.
Ramses did message me back, by the way, when I called him out on Twitter. How dare you, sir? I usually get second or third. Not the case, Ramses. You finish fourth.
Mm-hmm. So maybe you should reiterate that you suck.
But yeah, so for the weekly average this week, I ended up averaging across 13 different lineups, 933.31 points. Not too bad. But that being said, this was one of those weeks where, we had, the biggest fantasy scoring day on Thursday. Friday was still relatively good, and then Sunday happened when not that many not that many people were posting like 1,000 plus scoring lineups. Now, in regards to some of the players that posted big numbers this week, looking at a couple DPS, you had Nero posted 220, Surefour posted 235, Corey had a 215-point performance this week. I know Hotba, Michelle, Void all posted 200 plus totals as well, but it's really been Shaz who has been the absolute standout week to week here as of late for fantasy, and it's crazy to see just how many points he's putting up. Like, posting 255.8 is the highest total that we have seen in fantasy. And I don't think you can expect that every week, but the Gladiators have been consistently going to map 5s, and you have basically 3 players on that lineup week to week that have had 190 plus, 200 plus performances, and they've been really huge standouts. Now, that being said, there are a couple of players who maybe you wouldn't normally take a look at that did post some pretty big numbers. Like, I know Sansom from Washington Justice had like 180 plus point performance this week.
He also had a 228-point performance this week.
That's absolutely crazy. But
like, Sansom was the tank MVP of the week. Like, when you think about it, like, combined, he scored over 400 points in 2 games. So Sansom gets my tank MVP of the week, which is never thought I'd say that.
Right. Now, in regards to like DPS, Surefour ended up taking it on Friday with 235.76. That was the highest total we saw for the DPS. Nero also had a pretty good game this week on Thursday, posting 220. Soon had a 208 game on Thursday as well. But really, like, it was the flex tanks and the flex supports, again, that were really holding things down. You had Hotba, Michelle, Finzi, Void, Meko, Sansom, Boombox, Shu, Bedosian, Shaz, Raucous, and Twilight all posting 200 plus totals for at least one game this week. And I mean, I would never would have guessed Shaz posting 255 against Dallas Fuel. Like, I don't expect the Fuel to be that competitive because the Fuel did drop to a 2-0 lead. And again, this was like during the game where Los Angeles were under their meme name of the Big Geese, which was also a thing. So they actually had to bring it all the way back, Beaks up, and they got the reverse sweep. But well, at least I can go down undefeated in the history books at this point. But it did seem like across the board, DPS did take a little bit of a backseat to the flex roles in this particular week, as both of them had at least 6 players that posted 200 plus point performances.
Yeah, I mean, it was... The flex support is really kind of... I don't want to say coming back a little bit, because in Stage 3, we definitely saw a dip in fantasy output from flex supports, and you started to see main supports creep up just a tad on them. But now it's back to like it was in Stage 1 and Stage 2. Like, flex support, your gods. There's a fighter jet flying over
that's
my
what I figured
right
that
now.
was. I was like, is that thunder? Like, I couldn't tell.
No fighter jets. I live near a military base. So you saw the flex tanks, you saw the flex supports really flex their muscles. I'm trying to get flex in here as much as possible. But yeah, it's going to continue. You're not going to see until we get the stat blocking. We'll move main tanks probably to the forefront.
That being said, like, we've still been seeing main tanks post like 150, 160 totals here and there, but it's not
their max
at a consistent level, and that is at their max. And the flex tanks as a whole, especially now that we've primarily been seeing Diva, now that the meta has really started to situate more and more as the Sage has progressed, the totals have been getting progressively higher as the Sage moves on.
Yeah, it's we'll never, until we get it. It will always be, if you need an absolute, okay, I want these 5 players, and I only have $10 left or 10 points left. That's when you're like, okay, maybe I can just get a flex, a main tank, and hopefully they can put up like 125, 130.
Yeah,
Like that's kind of what you're hoping for.
I'd say like the most I would spend. I mean, like if I have to pick up a main tank, I wouldn't spend anything above 14, because 14, 15 seems to be the normal range for most main tanks at this point. But there are even a couple of like flex tank options that tend to hover around 15 as well. Like I know FRT is kind of like in that boat. But I know Roar and Pokpo put up some pretty decent numbers this past week, and looking at the current lineup or the current totals for this week, Pokpo is at 13, and Roar at 14, and so is Gushue. Gushue's also 14 this week.
Yeah, it's 100%. Like certain tanks probably could pump. Like you have those certain like you want to avoid people like Fate or Fact Fiction because their prices are inflated because of Stage 3, or at least Fate's is, because he was pumping out massive fantasy numbers and then Stage 3. So until that clears out, but yeah, like your Gushue's, God, I don't even know about Gushue. I don't know if I could start Gushue. Even in an emergency.
It's a harder pick in this meta, especially if he keeps trying to force a Winston to happen.
Yeah.
Dive in, dead.
I will say this, and I just double-checked it. Shaz, and this goes back to I'm going to instill this in everyone. He played Moira on every map.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he had gotten the most fantasy points in a single series so far. Like, plain and simple, he played 5 maps, yes, but he played 5 maps of Moira. Now, he did play some other heroes, but he at least played Moira for a decent amount on each map.
I mean, averaging 51 points a map, pretty good. I'd say.
Like he would have gotten if it would have been a 3-1, he still would have had over 200 points.
Mm-hmm.
So
he might not have finished on top, but he still would have had 200 plus.
Yes. And then one thing we did not go over when we were talking about our leagues that I want to is our Behind the Numbers listener league. Mm-hmm. We did have a tie. We had a tie for first place. So
really?
Lord Salad Man and Saturn both had 1,187.28 points. They had the same exact roster. They had Haxel, Corey, Choyobin, Sansam, Guido, Twilight.
I wonder what the probability of that is.
I don't even know.
Like, how many different lineup combinations can you make in
They were 130 points above second place.
Jeez.
Like, they blew everyone out of the water.
Well, technically third place.
Technically. I do want to give a special shout out to one of our patrons, Kesha, who in the description is Kesha, it's going down, I'm yelling timber. So massive props for that. She took 6th place. She had been on some, how do I put this? She has had some rough times with picking and those players just not playing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's had a very rough time of like, hey, I'm going to start Jake this week.
Then Jake gets benched.
Awkward. Like, she had some, so it was nice to see her up there. She beat all the hosts.
Yeah.
Like, she did great. So good on you, Kesha. You also win for It's Going Down at Amelia Timber.
So, unfortunately, like, we don't have all of the player costs in the spreadsheet this week, but I did go through and kind of, like, cycle through who I feel like would be a fairly good value because a lot of these players are at a lower cost. And I don't know if you've had a time to like take a look at some of the contests for the current week.
Yeah, I actually was. I picked out 4 people throughout the week that I would say are good buys for what their cost is.
Okay, I kind of skipped over Saturday and Sunday, and I primarily focus on Thursday. So like in regards to like budget picks, I know Boston has kind of been an iffy team, but they've been doing a lot of experimentation, and they do have a pretty soft lineup this week. Good matchup wise, at least. That should be pretty close. And I know there's always been kind of a discussion about, who's going to be their starting lineup. We actually saw Blase start in as a tank this past week, even though he is listed as a DPS. Definitely do not start Blase, for one. I also would not start RCK for the same reason, because it might continue to experiment, similar to what like the Gladiators were doing with Hydration prior. But you look at their flex supports, and Persia has been getting the nod more so over AimGod, and Persia right now is only sitting at a 10 cost. AimGod is 13. Now, that being said, Boston is a team that does tend to announce their lineup ahead of time. So if you're looking at spending heavier costs in, another role, this is one that you could definitely take a look at. I know Luffy is sitting at 14 for the Shanghai Dragons, and this is when they go up against the Dynasty, so that should be a pretty competitive series, and even Jahan is sitting at 15. And outside of that, I'd say also take a look at AKM this week, who sits at 13. So his number has still been relatively low, so that's another good budget DPS option, should you guys need to kind of like move things a little bit.
Yeah, Persia was my number one. I was like, okay, you have, I think it's what, Persia has started the last 24 maps at flex support for Boston. I think it's safe to say at that point, Persia's your starting flex support. Mm-hmm. So 10 points for Persia is a pretty good one. I did notice Jaehong at 15. Is it 15, 14, or 15?
It's 15 for Thursday.
It's 15.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones I wanted to add are FRD for 15 and Envy for 15. Are 2 tanks that I think you could get some good value. DPS side, Erster. Erster is still relatively low for what he could put out, because Atlanta has not been pumping out big fantasy games because they haven't played many fantasy games. Like, they haven't played many matches yet. So
and this week they face Washington, which should be pretty competitive.
Good. And Erster costs 15. So, like, when you're looking at it, let me just bring it up real quick. I was looking at, like, the DPS for, I think it was Friday is when he's his first game. And I'm looking at the DPS lineups, and it's just like, okay, who could I get? Well, I could get Rascal or Stratus for 17. Could get Baby Bay for 15, or I could get Erster for 15. Like, to me, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, to me, like, it's between Erster and Rascal out of that pairing.
Yeah, it's like, and like, even Architect is 17, so you could get Architect over Rascal. Like, you could get Architect and Erster for 32 points. Which is very good for your DPS lineup.
Yeah, another DPS who's kind of like split in the middle there. At 16 is Illicit, who's been doing pretty consistently, and he hasn't been getting subbed out for the Dynasty.
I do not trust the Dynasty still. I trust their tank line. I trust Jaehong. That's about it. Fitz
is the one that gets subbed out, though. Because Illicit is the May player. That's the primary reason. That's why you're not seeing him fluctuate.
I can't trust anything that Soul does at this point. And this has been going on for over a stage. Like, it's the cost is worth the risk, but you do take that risk. Like, and if you have to choose between illicit for 16 or Erster for 15, I'd say you take Erster every day of the week, in my opinion, from fantasy wise, because Erster's, no matter what, is going to stay in there. They're going to be switching out Enlair and Baby Bay. So Erster would definitely be one up there. And then I got to stick with Gato.
He's sitting at 15.
Still sitting at 15. Raucus is still sitting at 15. So, like, those 15 points, like 15 or fewer are like the keys to your success in a fantasy week. Because that allows you to go out and get your EQOs, your Carpes, stuff like that.
Or your Shaz for 21.
Yeah, you get to get your fantasy studs, and then you have to have your quality backup. Like, it's the same rule applies for any fantasy league out there. Like, you get that RB1 in fantasy football, but your RB2 has to be decent. So, same thing applies. Go with some of your 15 and lower. Persia's a very good bet, though. And that would allow you to, like, do anything.
Yeah, that basically puts you in a position where you can secure 220-plus players with the space that you do have on your roster at that point, since you're basically going to be sitting at 50 remaining for your other 3 slots.
Yeah, it's, 90 points for 5 slots. You can do a lot of damage with that.
Yeah, now outside of that, like, I know we tend to shy away from the main tanks, but, Pokebo and Roar have both been putting up some decent numbers, so, like, if you need a budget pick, I know Pokebo this week is at 13, Roar's at 14, and I feel like Roar would probably be the better of the 2 options, just due to the fact that Gliders have had that map 5 potential more so than the Atlanta Rain, but both do have some good matches this week. But man, I'm really excited for that Justice versus Rain match, primarily just due to the fact that this is happening at a time where both teams are undefeated in the stage, which is not something that you would expect to be saying at any given point. Just knowing that Justice is one of the teams.
Things you did not expect to say 3 weeks ago. Man, this Atlanta Rain Justice match is going to be lit. Like, no one would have expected this to happen, but it is. It's going to be I mean, in my mind, it's going to come down to whoever wins this is going to be the no Stage 4 playoff, but will be the champion of Stage 4. If Justice can win, they're going undefeated. I don't think that anyone doubts that. This is their last hurdle. Because I don't even know if they play next week.
Well, they're 5-0 right now.
Yeah, and they play twice this week. So yeah, they don't play. They could, by Sunday, they could be 7 and undefeated for the stage.
Yeah, they already surpassed my hot take of them getting 4 wins and more than doubling their win total for the season. So go figure. Right.
So this could be crazy. But yeah, that's definitely going to be my highlight of the week right there. Is that matchup,
which we will talk about for our pick'ems here in just a minute. So outside of that, are there any players in particular that you are targeting for the Saturday and Sunday games?
I mean, from a budget standpoint, not a whole lot. I think you have. Who I have coming up. Site's acting weird on me. All right, I can't seem to pull it up. Let me just look at this. Yeah, it's giving me all my. All right, Saturday. Spree and Michelle are. If Saturday is a really crappy tank week. Because there's so many that you want to start, but they all cost so much. So, like, if you're looking at Saturday, you're Poco Space, Elsa, Finzi, Michelle, Spree. That's and Envy. But only Envy costs less than 17 points.
Oh my gosh.
But Michelle has been pumping out some pretty good numbers as the off tank.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Michelle for like $17 is pretty good. You do have some really good budget supports on Saturday. Like you only have 2 support players over 15 points.
Okay, so that does basically give you the option if you do want to upper flex things to budget your flex support set and end up spending 30 on that front.
Yeah, like, and that's exactly what I did. So one of my teams on Saturday, I went with Spree and Michelle, but then I went with Gray and Raucous. For those, each were 15 points apiece, and that way I was still able to go out and get a 20-point DPS, and then agility. So I got Jinmu and agilities on Saturday. I can't complain about that. It's just the thing I've kind of come to realize is first things first, get your tank line set up. Because that is where you may have to spend the most points. You can always get a good DPS for like 14 and above, but you can't do that with tanks. Supports even, you can't even do that all with. So it's definitely going to be an interesting week. I will say DPS on Sunday is a little lackluster at the top. So you have your Prophet, your Nero, and your Corey. And then you're looking at people like Soon, BQB, Logix, Saya Playa, who have been able to pump out big numbers, but not as reliable as or consistently as one would hope.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's definitely not as top heavy as some others. But on the reverse side, tanks on Sunday are very well spread out. Like Sunday is one of the best tank days of the week. Because you have people from FRB Hotba at 15 and 16 points, and then you have Gargoyle, who's come out of nowhere and been a fantasy kind of god. Like, his Roadhog is insane. What did he have? Didn't he have like a map with 91% hook accuracy?
Yeah, he landed like
who does that?
Gargoyle apparently.
Yeah, so Gargoyle, hard carry for the Florida Mayhem. But he's up there, but then you have Fury, Note, Samson, Finzi, Gods. Like, Sunday is a very good tank day.
I do also want to point out that since next week is one of the homestand weekends, this week's schedule is a little bit different. So on Thursday and Friday, we only have 3 games being played. So there's a good chance, we might even see a couple of ties this week in regards to the stand-in, so keep an eye on that. But you're not going to have as many options this week due to the fact that, you will only have 6 teams playing earlier on in the week. So make sure that you're taking that into effect when you're wondering why you don't have as many choices.
Exactly. Yeah, Thursday and Friday, definitely. Thursday specifically was a pretty rough day looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not, you're not getting good players on it. Like, you have the Hanzo Spark, you have the Spark. Right now, none of those players, Baby, Godsby, that's really about it. Dallas Fuel, I don't know really of any of them, except maybe Note. You have Boston Uprising, which Persia, yeah. Mm-hmm. Florida Mayhem, you could probably start anyone. Seoul, you could probably start about half their team. And Shanghai, you could probably start about half their team reliably.
Yeah,
Because
like in that front, like you'd probably say Envy, Luffy, and Dean would probably be the three, just because the DM and the DM swap has been in and out with the Yunjin. And I know on Thursday, like I was like, crap, what do I do with my DPS line? Because that's really the biggest question mark. Like I felt pretty confident in spending the most on the flex tank option. So like I know on Thursday I went with Gargoyle and Michelle for my tank line. Then I was looking at Jahan,
exactly what I did.
Jahan and Luffy for my support line. And then like my DPS line, I'm like, I honestly don't know which way. Like right now, like this isn't finalized, and I still have 3 salary cap left at this point. But for now, I just penciled in Godspeed and listed it. I don't even know if I'm going to keep that at this point. But like with so many limited options right now, it's just like it feels more like a coin toss, just with the options that you have out there. It's just like, well, I feel good about 4 of my 6. The rest, I'm not too sure about.
Yeah, and it's yeah. Thursday is going to be an interesting one, and I'm interested to see how we do this week. That would be a bad week for a day for us to try our budget league.
Mm-hmm.
Because we'd just be like, okay, we're both going to put in Persia. So anytime that day that Persia's not playing, I think is when we should do our budget league this week.
Okay.
But yeah, this is the tank line is pretty obvious for this week, for that day. But everything else is just a complete crapshoot. I don't know. This is the joy of fantasy. You get to deal with all this crap.
Pretty much. I would say Envy is a very solid third option, though, for your flex link, at least on that day. Because that could free up even more room for you to pick a primary DPS for that day. But with that being said, let's talk about some of the marquee games. So speaking of Thursday, we had the Seoul Dynasty going up against the Shanghai Dragons. This is a 7 seed going up against the 10 seed. This is the second time that we're going to see the Dynasty playing the Dragons this season. Now, these two teams did face each other in Stage 4, Week 1, during the WTF is the meta week, basically. And the Dragons ended up taking that one 3-1. Now, that being said, Ed, we've seen... I don't want to say like we've seen the Dynasty completely situate, but we have been seeing less substitutions. Jahan has been in there full time. Fitz has been in there primarily. We've seen a little bit of Fleta, but Fitz has been the primary off DPS, with Illicit getting the brunt of the work as their Mei/projectile player. But really, it's been Michelle and Jahan that have been the backbone of that team. In particular, Marvell continues to be a very solid main tank. Now, on the Dragon side, we've seen a little bit of inconsistencies. They've been doing a lot of experimentation in regards to what DPS duo they want to run. But this is a team that has a lot of flash and a lot of pan, and they can do a lot of damage with their aerial assault. So looking at this match in particular, who are you going to give the nod to? Like, do you feel like the Dynasty are going to squeak this one out? Maybe get a little bit of redemption over the former Kondu Panthera squad?
Yeah, I could actually see that. I really could. The Shanghai Dragons are not the Shanghai Dragons that we knew in Stage 3. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, they're 1-3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not they're not playing that well, and what everyone thought the Shanghai Dragons could be coming into this stage is just doesn't work out with this meta. And they either need to switch off of it or just continue playing their style, and then they'll be knocked out of the playoffs as quick as the Hanzo Spark. If Seoul, who is just a giant cluster bomb of a team in general, like that whole team is just a shit show, but they are a team. One thing you could not say about that team is they don't mix things up when need be, or they don't kind of like not switch soon enough. So
well, sometimes if they swap too much.
yes. So like I could definitely see Seoul taking this one at least 3-1. Could be 3-2, but I'd say Seoul 3-1 in this one. Michelle has really like the tank line for the Seoul Dynasty, they have on lockdown right now. I really like Marvell, and Michelle has really kind of come into his own. Like, isn't me like, and he's not getting this praise, but is Michelle the rookie of the year?
I don't know if I would put. I'd say he's like a bubble consideration. I don't know if I'd put him like top 5.
He was the OG diva Sombra player. And he revolutionized that. After he started doing it, that's when you started to see other off tanks for these mid-level teams switch over to Sombra, their diva over to the Sombra player. And he started it all, and he kept up with it. And then Seoul did their whole, we have 2 separate rosters within the same team, blah, 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 blah. And then that went away, and now he's back with a vengeance. Like, I would give him serious consideration for Rookie of the Year. So, I'm going to give it to Seoul. I like them. Shanghai Dragons are on their way down.
I feel like the Dynasty take this unless the Dragons can force them into Widow play. Like, that's the key weakness that I see in the Dynasty right now, just because we haven't really been seeing Fleta. And I know Fitz is capable of playing the Widow, but we just haven't really had a platform to really get a good look at it so far. But I feel like across the board, Illicit's play has been pretty consistent. The Maywall usage has been getting good isolation, which has been secure in the picks for Dynasty, so I'm still expecting this one to be pretty close. But in regards to, like, Map 5 potential, especially on Thursday, this one is definitely at that highest degree. So I'm expecting this one to definitely deliver on the fantasy front and put up some pretty good points. So hopefully that Jahan Luffy lineup for flex support is just going to come up posting, like, 360, 380, something like that. Would be just perfect.
That would be very nice. And the other thing you really have to think about is Shanghai they have to know this coming into it, is they're playing for their playoff spot. Like, they don't play, like, they don't have a cakewalk schedule the way they're playing. Like, they play Seoul, they play Paris, they play Spark. Not super hard games, but not cakewalk games either. And they're right on the brink there of, if they could go 3-0, they could go 0-3. And they're in 9th place right now. Yeah, 9th place right now.
They're 9th or 10th right now.
Yeah, 9th or 10th. And I know they're above Atlanta ran, and Atlanta's not going to miss the playoffs. So, like, that last spot truly is up. The last 2 spots are going to be between the Valiant, the Chengdu Hunters, and the Shanghai Dragons.
But Valiant have the roughest go, I would say, because they do face the Gladiators and the Shock.
Yes, the Valiant have the rough one, although they do play Boston this week. Like, let's be real. Like, let's say Shanghai loses both matches this week to Seoul and Paris. While Valiant beat Boston, they're tied.
Yeah, but we also nearly saw Valiant lose to the Mayhem, so who knows at this point.
It's a big bunch of what ifs, but it really comes down to those 3 teams, Shanghai, Chengdu, and Valiant, for the last 2 spots, because I don't think Atlanta's not going to win 2 of their next 5 matches or 4 matches.
Yes.
And Philly would have to lose out. Yeah, Philly would have to lose out. And Valiant would have to win out for them to be knocked out. So yeah, Shanghai, Chengdu, Valiant competing for those last 2 spots. So this could be a big one.
Absolutely. So moving on to Friday, we have that showdown between the two top teams of the stage. We got the Washington Justice going up against the Atlanta Reign. Both teams entering this match undefeated this stage. We have Justice, who currently lead the pack at 5-0 for the stage. Atlanta have only played 3 games, but have won all 3 of theirs. And these two teams did face off in Stage 2, Week 2, and the Atlanta Reign did take that one 3-1. But again, that was a different time. That was in the 3-3 meta, back when Giannis could feed his brains out, playing the Reinhardt or the Winston or whatever version of GOATs that they were playing. But now, we're entering a meta where it's a little bit harder to throw as a main tank, which is great to see. But you have two teams that have really been playing up into 2-2, that have really turned their season around, and at least for one, there is still playoff potential for Atlanta Reign. Now, that being said, the Justice, they've been all smiles. They have been putting themselves in the perfect spot to play the role of the spoiler, and you can tell that they take a lot of pride in this, the way that they have been showing up on stage. So I love the fact that, we have a team that for the majority of the season were disregarded, counted out, just due to the fact that they were having a number of issues in the prior meta. Now all of a sudden you see Corey popping off, Stratus has been looking good, Guido has been a pretty good standout outside of dying first a lot, but, it's kind of like the bumper effect on that regard. Guido goes in, he dies, and then Washington just still end up winning the fight on the ground, which is great to see. Then you have Atlanta, who have been having Ursa really popping off, so you have a lot of talent on the DPS front in this particular series, but who are you going to give the edge to between the Justice and the Reign?
I'm going to give it to the Reign, and it relies on one person and one person only, and that's Janice. I think Janice is going to be the Achilles heel of this team. Every team has a weak point, and Janice is still that weak point for the Justice. As great as everyone else has been playing, Janice has been... Yes, he has not been able to feed as much.
It's because he's behind the shield.
Exactly. But it doesn't mean he is... Like, this past week, you saw it a lot against the Outlaws. Mm-hmm. He is just out of place so much. And he dies for so much. He is the dog man of the tank lines. Like, dog man always dies first. Janice always dies first.
Yeah, you just don't hear him shouting into the crowd.
Mm-hmm. So, maybe nobody would understand. Like, I'm gonna give it to Atlanta, but it's coin flip for me. Like, it's a legit, like, flip the coin. I have no idea who's gonna win this one. It's because it's gonna be one of those, which DPS is gonna carry their team? Is it gonna be Ursa or is it gonna be Corey? Because I think Sam and FRD or Daco, probably FRD, are pretty comparable. And the way Guido is playing right now is, you know what? Him and Dogman, I put him on even footy. And Masa is probably a little bit better than Arc, but not by much. But Popo versus Shaz, it's not even remotely close in the book. So I'm gonna give it to the Reign in this one. Probably a 3-1 would be my guess. I don't know if I have faith in giving it a 5-map series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty conflicted with this one. I do like the Justice DPS duo more than the Reign right now. I think I'm gonna lean towards the Justice primarily just due to the fact that they've not been shy in regards to bringing something new to the table. So like this past week we got to see the Justice incorporating a little bit of some Metro play control, which was nice to see. Which honestly could play a pretty big role in the new patch. Not that the Justice is going to be playing at that point, but the Symmetra has been pretty effective, and we haven't really seen any sort of flashiness in regards to like off-kilter comps from the rain. But this is going to be a very exciting series. This one could honestly go either way. But I feel like the Justice right now, we're just going to ride that wave of momentum they have. And I really want to see them complete, that 7-0 stage after only picking up, what was it, like 2 wins for the prior 3 stages?
It's something insane like that. Like, this is Boston Uprising level of tomfoolery from last season.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Absolutely. So moving on to Saturday, we have a match between the Chengdu Hunters and the Houston Outlaws. Now, the Hunters are currently sitting in 12th place. They are trying to cling onto that spot for that play-in tournament at the end of the stage. Unfortunately for the Outlaws, they do not have a shot at making the playoffs. They were actually eliminated from contention in this past week. This is the first time that we're going to see these two teams facing off this season, and when you look at how the Outlaws have fared against some of these other Pacific region teams, so that includes like the Spark, Charge, and Dragons, the Outlaws are 1-3 against the Pacific region. But looking back at the Spark have played well against the other Pacific region teams. They ended up winning. Do you expect the same, except the opposite way, with the Outlaws continue to lose, and this time against the Hunters?
I mean, how do you bet on the Outlaws? Like, you can't.
You bet that they will somehow flub up the substitution.
Well, like, all right, everyone, at a certain point, you have to stop making excuses for the Houston Outlaws.
And New York, for that matter.
Exactly. Like, I mean, Houston is 1-5. 1-5 this stage.
Right.
And people were raving about them coming into stage 4, saying, they got a good, matchups this stage, stuff like that. And it's just like, no, you have 1 win. Yes, it was against the Gladiators, but you lost 5 other times. You're going up against a team who plays a crazy style, is competing for the last playoff spot. I know technically 7 through 12 is not a playoff spot, but in my mind, the top 12 is playoffs. I don't think this is even going to be close. Like, at 3-1 probably from Chengdu. I think Chengdu, because Chengdu has 2 matches left. First one is this week against the Shock, and then they have to close it up against the Outlaws. So this is the last chance. They have to go into Sunday being like, okay, our playoffs are on the line. We did our best. We won our last game, type of situation. So I don't see a way that the Houston Outlaws win this one.
Yeah, it's a weird spot, because the Outlaws tend to do good when they're just counted out. And they had a lot of negative attention this past week for various reasons. Whether it was the fact that, Linkster and Dante were in full time and Jake was nowhere to be seen. Whether it was the halftime segment with Sideshow when he was talking about trading like 3 of their starters, for example. So I want to see how much bite the Outlaws are going to have this week, but Hunters right now have... I don't want to say like they have the best opportunity to play the spoiler, at least in regards to like the play-in teams, because I feel like there are a lot better teams that have been playing more consistently compared to the Hunters. But I feel like in the current meta that we are seeing, this is playing more to the Hunter strength, and we just haven't quite seen enough from the Outlaws, and when we do, it just hasn't been at a consistent level throughout the stage. So I feel like the Hunters are a safe bet. I will say it's going to be 3-1 or 3-0. We have been seeing a lot of draws as of late, so a 3-0 would not surprise me.
I will say this, just looking at it the standings real quick, assuming the Hunters lose to the Shock, which I think everyone kind of assumes, the Hunters will lose to the Shock on Friday. Saturday's matches is, well, Valiant versus Boston. Valiant should win that. Let's just go with that. Valiant will beat Boston. Chengdu is in a win or you're out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, with map record wise, if Chengdu does not go 1-1 this week, they have no shot at the playoffs, I think. Because unless the Valiant lose to Boston, Shock, and Gladiators. Because if Valiant beat Boston and Chengdu loses to the Hunters, they have the same record, but Chengdu has a -9 map differential, and Valiant has a -1 map differential. So this literally will be a win or you're up situation. That just adds to the ass whooping that they're going to give the Outlaws. And we don't know if Jake's going to be back.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing. We do not know if Jake's going to be back. He had Linkser go in, and Linkser looks bad.
Yeah, he's very shaky.
And if he comes in again, then it's over. Game over, man. Game over.
The married man meta can only get you so far. But this will lead into Sunday, when we have a rematch from Stage 4, Week 3, when the Florida Mayhem, the last place Florida Mayhem, officially the 20th ranked team in the Overwatch League for the season, go up against the Toronto Defiant, who are currently 18th. So these two teams did play last week, and the Mayhem ended up taking a win 3-1. Now, since then, we have seen the Toronto Defiant release their head coach, Bishop. So they currently have 3 of their coaches kind of like filling in for the remainder of the season. So, you get like Optodox, Barrow, and... Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the other name because I don't have it written down. But they have 3 coaches basically taking over for the remainder of the season at this point. We don't know the reason behind the actual release of Bishop at this point. And I know there's like there's always been talk around Bishop and, Korean players, that sort of thing, so we'll see whether or not he lands on his feet, finding a new home on a more Korean roster, but Toronto have been moving more towards a mixed roster. Now, that being said, Toronto, as good as they look at times, which isn't always happening, they've kind of been... They're kind of like a roller coaster, right? Like, they got their highs, they got their lows. But it never seems to, like, even out.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it's so hard to get a read on this team. But when you look at a team like the Mayhem, they've just had this new bloodline in them. As soon as Gargoyle got the nod to replace Zephyr on this lineup, they just look like a different team. And while they have not been the cleanest team, as, they're still not looking too hot this stage, we've at least seen more life out of them compared to the Defiant. Regardless of who's the 20th team, who's the 18th team, I don't think really anyone on our network is listing the Defiant over the Mayhem at this point, and I'm pretty sure that's going to reflect in our picks as well. So I'm assuming you're going to go with the Mayhem in this match again.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Mayhem, but I do want to point out, and you kind of alluded to this, the Defiant aren't as bad. Like, they're the second worst team, I think, by record.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, fourth worst, or tied for fourth worst, because Boston and Dallas are just god-awful. They're not as bad as I think their record appears. They've had a pretty rough stage. Like week 1, they went up against the Justice and the Spitfire. Week 2, they went up against the Dragons and the Fusion. And then they went up against the Mayhem and the Soul Dynasty. Now they're facing the Mayhem again. Like, they have not had a bottom-tier team to play against.
Relatively...
That we thought was that's
true.
Actually a bottom-tier team.
But basically, like, that's 5 playoff teams, essentially.
Yeah. So, like, they have not gotten the best of draws. when it comes to the lineups. Do I think the Toronto Defiant are a playoff contender, like caliber team? No. But I don't think that they're, should be in the conversation as like the one of the one or two worst teams in the Overwatch League. I'm still going Mayhem on this one because Gargoyle is probably the second best Roadhog I've seen in the Overwatch League this stage, behind Choyobin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think Choyobin and then Gargoyle is number 2. So watch him. It's insane. All you gotta say is 91% hook accuracy. And yeah, it's probably gonna be a 3-1. Right now, Toronto's just in the I don't give a shit moment. Like, they're just like, Mangachu and Logix are just going to be like, ho hum, we're going to be messing around. We're just going to, we're going to go out there, have fun. We're not going to probably take things too seriously. They have no coach. They're just like, let's just have some fun to end the stage and get to the off season. Which, good for them. Don't take it too serious.
Yeah, I feel like Toronto's best chance is behind Logix. If Logix can get in the head of Saya Player, which can happen because Logix has been popping off here as of late, that's definitely going to potentially like tip the scale in favor of the Defiant. But I don't see that happening. I think Mayhem are going to repeat and secure a 3-1 win over Toronto this week. But they'll still end up finishing in 20th overall for the season. But with that being said, the guys, just as a reminder, of course, keeping an eye on the play-in tournament. Obviously, the 7th through the 12th ranked teams are all vying for their spots. Really, there's only a handful of teams that have secured, top 6 at this point. So we'll see who locks up more playoff positions this week after the week wraps up. But with that being said, let's go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best things to do is to go leave us a review over on iTunes or your podcasting app of choice. We're always looking for ways to improve the show. So any sort of insight you guys can throw our way, we greatly appreciate. Now, if you would like to find additional Overwatch-related content, be sure to check out Overwatch Recall, which you can find a list of several Overwatch League, and Path to Pro podcast over on our website. As Ed keeps typing, shh, don't tell him. and then, every Sunday we do the weekly recall, where you can find a list of all of the podcast episodes from the prior week, and all of the 222 titled episodes, which tilt me. Thanks a lot, Bob. So, follow Overwatch Recall on Twitter at OWRecall. And of course, guys, if you want to support our network, which has a number of different Overwatch podcasts, you can do a couple of things. We do stream regularly on Twitch, so, you can do, Twitch Prime subs. That costs you absolutely nothing. You can do normal Twitch subs, which is, $4.99 a month. Then, of course, we have our Patreon, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. So you can learn more information on that at patreon.com/OWL Network. So you too could join the likes of our Master and Above patrons, Blazabob, Brennan, Joseph Ball Owl, and the one that kicked all of our asses in the Listener League, Kesha, in helping our network grow. So guys, thank you so much again for all of your continued support. But Ed, why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can get a hold of us?
All right, first off, I had my mic mute off, and it was off, but then I went and I realized, I'm like, crap, my whole thing update. I had to do an update earlier today, and it set my device to automatically to my webcam and not my Yeti. So like my mic was off. So my mic mute, as I've had it off, at least I thought I've had it off, and I'd be typing throughout this whole thing. So I apologize.
It was only during that.
Oh, okay, because like I've had the mic off, and then I'm like,
it's just like one of those moments where like I just can't not say something.
Yeah, no, because I'm like, crap, my mic is actually off, and I'm like, oh no, not again. So I apologize to everyone out there, but you can contact us. So contact us at contact@owlandshow.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at Twitter at OWL by the numbers. We do have a website, awesome new website with a bunch of fun new articles, videos, all that fun stuff over at OWLNshow.com. We do have YouTube, and that's youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We are on Discord, so come join us over there at discord.me/OWLNshow. We are on Twitch, and that's twitch.tv/OWLNshow. Obviously, we're streaming that right now. Not for you podcast listeners, you're a day late, and where were you? We are a Twitch affiliate, so come help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon, as I just did for my 12th month. Yay! We do stream pretty regularly, so Overwatch League Network airs Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. OWL by the numbers, this show airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. And then Heroes Never Die, the other show Totem and myself do, airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then host streams, when available, run on a flex schedule. So be sure to follow us on Twitch, Discord, Twitter, all that fun stuff to know when we are going live. Totem mentioned the patreon.com, so come over there. Any help is much appreciated. You can contact me personally on Twitter at EdinarOverwatch. Totem, where can they find you at?
Well, I'm also over on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR, and if you guys, want to poke fun at Ramses for finishing in 4th place, do so at Ramses_OW, and of course, you can find Bob also on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That is BLAZZIN_BOB. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much again for joining us tonight on a special 2-man episode of OWL by the numbers.
Yes.
This has been episode number 28. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined this week by Edinar, and we hope to see you guys back tomorrow night to talk all about, 2-2, roll lock, roll Q, Sigma, shenanigans, all of that fun stuff on the next episode of Heroes Never Die. And by the way, make sure you check out the forum and overview on our YouTube for Sigma if you haven't already, because I know Spider worked pretty hard on that. But we'll see you guys back tomorrow. Have a good night.
Have a good one.